Dianne Feinstein returned to the Senate floor yesterday afternoon and cast her first 2 votes since February after the absence she took due to health issues. When she arrived at Capitol Hill, she was helped into a wheelchair and met by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. According to NBC, Feinstein told reporters she feels much better, but did not answer when asked about why she decided to return or to respond to calls from critics to resign.
Intercept reporter Ken Klippenstein took to Twitter yesterday and said, all right, it's time to name and shame Dianne Feinstein's staff, all of whom should be blacklisted from politics forever for caring so little about their country that they refused to resign. Adam Russell, press secretary, paid $102,000. Alec Bardashevich, legislative aide, $73,000. Candace Hall, constituent correspondence director, $85,000. Tammy Pham, legislative correspondent. Will Kink, et cetera, so on. Reading off all of these names of the various people who have worked for her. And okay, look, I respect Ken. I think he's a great journalist. We've had him on a lot. And I don't care necessarily about the feelings of the staffers, but I also think this is totally counterproductive. I don't see what this accomplishes. It's not the staffers' fault that she won't resign, obviously. Like, that's her call. I don't see what responsibility they bear to, they should all quit in protest, then other people would work for her. I don't think.
Interesting that you should bring up, should they quit in protest? Because Politico came out with a story today about one of her staffers who did exactly that, a young man named Jamarcus Purley, who the article talks about was working for Feinstein, who was concerned, was driven into politics and really galvanized by things like the 2020 protests and Black Lives Matter, and thinking about his own life growing up in Flint, Michigan, and the own lack of resources that he had, and then looking and contrasting that with the kind of priorities that he was seeing in Congress generally, but more specifically in Dianne Feinstein's office. And in this piece, they explained that he made the choice to quit exactly like that, to walk out, and before he left, hilariously or inappropriately, depending on your take, taking a picture of himself smoking a joint.
Good for him. It accomplishes absolutely nothing. So.
Well, because it's just one person. But isn't that the whole point of movies like Spartacus and protest movements and strikes and all of the things that have caused change to happen over the course of human history? That if people were to stand together, if her staff were to have come out and said, united, she is not actually fit for office a long time ago, then the Democrats might not be in the situation they're in right now. No?
I don't think the staff was ever going to accomplish that. I think she's intended to. You could have had Chuck Schumer put some pressure on her to get out of there instead of greeting her at the steps. And we should talk about those pictures of her. Look, it feels like elder abuse to me. She looks like she's in terrible shape, pain possibly. I feel very bad for her. There's nothing dignified about dragging a very old old woman around like this.
Yeah.
Clearly not capable of doing the job. And this was almost being framed as some moment of triumph for her or something. It's sickening to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely sickening.
Well, so this guy he actually was let go, not quit, but after this kind of protest, but purely what he said, Jamarcus, was that, here's from Politico, he thought he was being punished for telling hard truths about Feinstein. It was obvious to him that her mental faculties were dimming and that she might be going senile. He also had some more substantive political concerns here. But he said he had talked about this with others in the office. The chief of staff seemed to be operating as a shadow senator since the actual one was, in his opinion, no longer mentally there. I mean, at a certain point, when do you, as an employee, become complicit in this kind of dereliction of responsibility?
The dereliction of responsibility is hers. She should resign. She should get out of there.
So you don't think that there's any kind of whistleblower obligation at any point for anybody who's so close?
No. I'm glad the staff, if they've done that, have communicated to the press that what the situation is. I just don't think demanding they all resign is going to come. They could all resign.
Well, it's not demanding they all resign. It's putting their numbers, their public officials, putting their numbers up on Twitter so that people can call and pressure them to either talk to the press or create
Ken
internal
said
pressure.
They should never work. Again, I don't care about them, but he said they should never work in politics again. It seemed excessively mean to me.
Okay, maybe. I think that maybe it was Ryan Graham who took the position that maybe the lower level staffers should have less scrutiny on them than more senior staffers. And I think that's a reasonable line to take. But look, we sit in a country where we talk constantly in hyperbolic terms about the exigency of every situation. People either think that immigration is a crisis, or climate is a crisis, or inflation is a crisis, police violence is a crisis, crime in the streets is a crisis. Everything's a crisis. But the idea of picking up a phone and pressuring some staffers is a bridge too far in the way of making any change. And at a certain point, that tension has to be resolved. Environment's a crisis, but God forbid someone throws soup at a painting that's covered up, or block a road to try to get someone to pay attention.
Like throwing soup at it's not going to do anything.
The border is a crisis, but also we want to defund DHS. I mean, which is it gonna be? And at a certain point, is it all about an outrage cycle without wanting to do anything that applies real leverage and pressure on any of the folks that have an ability to make a decision?
But I don't think throwing soup at paintings actually does apply any real pressure.
So do you think that calling Dianne Feinstein's office applies pressure, more pressure than sitting on Twitter saying...
I didn't say don't call her office. I'm saying it's not going to improve the situation. It's not going to improve the business of the Senate. I mean, from a Democratic perspective, what they're upset about is she can't make it to votes, and the whole business of the Senate operating is being thwarted by her obstinacy. The staffers leaving would gum up the works even more, and they'd eventually be replaced.
But the argument, the argument is not that the staffers should resign specifically, is what I understood, is that you should be applying pressure in whatever mechanism. It's the ask is not specified here. So it's not that you guys should all...
I mean, I don't know if he was asking them to do anything. He was saying they should never work on Capitol Hill again.
Well,
I don't really care, but...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that is exactly what the goal should be here, exactly. But I do think that putting names and faces on the people who are doing harm to the public is important. If you're a public official, that there might be a line somewhere where
I think the only people who are going to make her go were Democratic leadership in Congress.
That might be true, but then maybe there is a case for her staff actually all resigning. Because if she cannot get to her door by herself...
Chuck Schumer's staff and be like, I mean, they should have done this long time ago before it was too late to do any kind of replacing, and said, she is not good. We can't keep up this farce.
But it sounds like, because there have been people who've been saying that for years, whistleblowers for years. Years ago, there were articles being written about her cognitive abilities. Years ago, there was an article written about some doctor who had said that she had been prescribed some medication that indicated that there was some cognitive impairment. Years and years and years ago, and that hasn't had any effect. And so, while I appreciate, what did AOC said? It always gets thrown back in her face that protests are ugly. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, and then she turns around and complains about discomfort that happens to her. But I mean, I think that first observation is right. And folks who are the expression of frustration at the Capitol on 1/6 was a legitimate expression, even though the law shouldn't have been violated. People who say the expression of protest in the street over 2020 was a legitimate expression of frustration. MLK saying that violence in protest riots are the language of the unheard. There's something true about all of that.
Yeah,
and I just have a hard time getting so worked up about
protests having any kind of effect on anything, but you do, I guess.
Protests have never had an effect on anything.
I didn't say they've never had an effect. I said I take a dimmer view on them having a...
So sometimes protests work.
Invariably, I'm sure there are examples.
Okay, I think that we could put our heads together
usually
and come up with an example
a bunch of stuff,
protests working.
Set some things on fire. Then
the founding of America and the Boston Tea Party and the Revolutionary War. I mean, I think we could come up between the two as a couple of examples of protests working. All I'm saying is I don't have a lot of energy to be critical of Ken's move when all that's being asked in this moment is this de minimis call your senator kind of campaign.
It doesn't make a list of the top 1,000 things that really bugged me in the last 24 hours, but we're talking about it. So just giving you my take.
Let us know what you think. Do you think that Ken has gone too far? Do you think congressional staffers should be kind of publicly harangued in this way? Is there a line that you would draw between what kind of staffers deserve this kind of pointed criticism from the likes of intrepid reporter Ken Klippenstein? Let us know in the comments. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.